is March 17th, 2026, and President Trump is now declaring that he doesn't need any help, that the U.S. is perfectly fine to handle the war in Iran. After all, didn't they win it on day one? Of course, it's now day 18, and you have Iran in a position where they are fully in control of the Strait of Hormuz. If a vessel passes through, it's because they are the ones allowing it. And Trump is in a position where he's scrambling to try to get other countries on board. No one wants to join his Hormuz coalition, as it's being called. Oh, and on top of that, he's also backing away from his planned trip to China later this month to meet in person with President Xi Jinping. And it is kind of ironic, isn't it, that the US is now in a position where they're losing all of these very expensive radar systems due to attacks from Iran, and they don't have the ability to repair them. Oh, because they need all of those rare earth minerals from China that Beijing is now restricting because they know that they are being used by the US military. Because the US empire couldn't just pick one war at a time. No, it had to go to war with the entire multipolar world. So what does that mean for where tensions are headed? Well, we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Colonel Larry Wilkerson, a U.S. Army combat veteran, former Chief of Staff to the U.S. Secretary of State, and a senior fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network. Colonel Wilkerson, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Good to be with you, Rachel.
It's great to have you back on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as the news in this morning is that U.S. Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, has become the first official within the Trump administration to step down in protest of the war in Iran. And he announced his resignation with a statement on X in which he said, quote, "I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." Now, we are now on day 18 of this war that the U.S. and Israel are waging against Iran. So how do you view the current state of tensions as President Trump's 4-day operation has now turned into a war that he can't seem to get out of?
That's a good summary of it. This resignation is interesting because if you know anything about the individual, he was really hardline MAGA. And so for him to leave, I hope indicates a real crack in the surface, if you will, of that group, especially as they surround Donald Trump. But your bigger question, we were talking ahead of time, Haret summed it up this way: all Iran has to do is not lose. All the United States and Israel have to do is a spectacular victory. And it's not going to occur. I don't think it's going to occur at all. I was going to say not anytime soon, but I don't think it's going to occur anytime. And Donald Trump's already mired in some of the repercussions, the most damaging and colossally global of which is the importance of the Strait of Hormuz to global traffic, particularly oil and gas and fertilizer, urea, for example. We're talking about destabilizing markets all over the world, particularly oil markets. I looked this morning, I think Brent crude was at 109. West Texas Intermediate was about 107 or so. They're going to go a lot higher. And I recall the embargo, you were too young for that, I suspect, but I recall when I couldn't even drive to Washington because I would stop at a filling station coming out of Fort Monroe, and the line was a mile and a half long. And if I dared to stay in that line, by the time I got to the pump, sometimes the pumps were empty. That was, people just don't remember that. They're not old enough to remember it. But that was the oil embargo the Arabs put on us. And we're looking at the potential for that sort of thing again, and not just aimed at the United States, but at the whole Western world. So Trump's plaintive cry and then condemnation of his NATO allies and Europeans in general for not coming to his beck and call to work on the Strait of Hormuz is understandable from the point of view that they're mad at him over Ukraine and other things, but also understandable in terms of they're watching this to see which way it goes and where it goes. You may have seen that the EU passed a law saying that 5 years from the passage of the law, of course, it was around the start of the special military operation, 2022, they would stop buying the exquisitely excellent for them Arctic LNG, which Russia produces and comes to them on their own bottoms, to Bremerhaven, Le Havre, and places like that. So it's very conducive to everyone's interests. Well, they just loaded up with they bought all of Russia's Arctic LNG for this coming year. And when they were queried about it by the press in Europe, the head of the EU, I think it was, I won't say it, that woman, she said, well, it doesn't go into effect until January 27. Well, I guarantee in January 27, they'll find another way to put it off. So they're in a bind, however you look at it, for energy. And this is just going to make it worse. And this is going to benefit Vladimir Putin enormously, which is why Trump called him and lifted some of the sanctions in order to get Putin to help him. I can just imagine that phone call. Putin on the other end saying, well, what is it you want, Donald? I want you to help me control world oil prices. Plus, Trump allowed our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, whose national security level not to go below is 500 million barrels, to go down to 415. And he never refilled it, as he promised to do, because Biden did most of that. He promised to refill it when he ran, and right after he was elected and inaugural time, he reiterated that promise. He didn't do it. So now we're tapping into our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is already at dangerous levels. This is not good for real national security reasons, not these trumped up ones. Isn't that a good term? With regard to Iran. The guy was right who resigned. This is not in our interest. They were no threat to us whatsoever. And we're embarked on it because of his attempt to get our attention off Epstein, and because of Miriam Adelson and millions of dollars and Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah, it's insane that we find ourselves in this position. And I know that you were just here on the show about 3 weeks ago now, right? And we were talking about the lead up to Trump's State of the Union address and this question of whether he was going to announce the war on Iran. Then he decided to wait until Friday after markets closed. And that's all fine and good if you think you're going to just pull off a weekend operation and then clean everything up by Monday. But exactly as you're noting, we're not seeing that happen. Now the global economy is really starting to feel the pain. And I know that Trump came out in a recent post within the last couple of hours when he was saying, we don't need anyone's help. Well, yeah, that's after he called on all of these countries from China, France, the UK, Japan, South Korea to send their warships. And they've all politely declined. Now we're watching as I know there's been about a handful of ships that have been able to get through the Strait of Hormuz because Iran allowed them to. So Trump has basically handed Iran control of global oil traffic. What does that say to really the world about how much control Iran actually does have and how little control the US now has in this war that it chose to wage in the first place?
Well, you just summed it up quite well by saying that he thought it was going to be short term. You know, the markets would come back up the next week and everything would be copacetic. He's dead wrong. He's absolutely dead wrong. And that demonstrates his strategic calculus was completely broken. At worst, this is going to lead to a regional followed by a global confrontation, if nothing else, over the economics of it, if you will. We've already seen the repercussions for real national security interests because he just canceled, and I can't believe he did this so quickly and so overtly, his meeting with Xi Jinping. I mean, here is the number one relationship we have on the face of the earth. And you're canceling it because you started a war that negates that relationship by your starting the war, really, because he's flying in China's face too, majorly in China. I'm sure one of the reasons he canceled it because he didn't want to get the lecture from Xi Jinping.
Right.
Yeah. And it would have been a harsh lecture too, because let me give you one example. This morning, I learned how many of the multi-million dollars, some of them $500 million each, radars essential to our prosecution of this conflict were knocked out by Iran in the last 4 or 5 days. It's unbelievable how many they knocked out. These are things that make THAAD, for example, work, the Theater High Altitude Air Defense. Knocked them out, completely knocked them out. And Trump has been talking about, not for public dissemination, of course, but in private channels, he's been asking and talking to Hegseth about how do we fix this. And it's come back to Hegseth, and Hegseth, I assume, gave it to Trump. We can't, because the radars require rare earth metals that we can only get from China, and China's not going to give them to us. They've already said they're not. So, we can't even replenish that stock. This is just utter stupidity in terms of every dimension of it, from the little tactical level like that, which might become very important, all the way up to the strategic level, where, as the gentleman who resigned said, this is not a war we needed to fight. This is a war of choice, and it's a damnably bad choice. I think he's right. And we haven't seen the half of it yet, or even a quarter of it yet, I don't think. And I watched a video yesterday. I got actually tickled by it. It was a video of a very vibrant, youthful, young Bibi Netanyahu in a coffee shop in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or somewhere. And he turns to the camera, and it's not the current Bibi Netanyahu. It's the Bibi Netanyahu of several years ago. And he looks into the camera and he says something to the effect of, "They say I'm wounded. They even say I'm dead. Well, I'm not. Here I am." Bibi, don't you know we're not that stupid? That was made before this ever started, just in case you did get hurt. So the first question I had was, is he hurt? Has something happened to him? Because now he's come out and said, "I understand some people saw my video and they think it, blah, blah, blah." Well, he's just confusing us. And probably that was the intent, but I don't know that. I don't know that. He might have been hurt. The scenes I've seen of Tel Aviv in particular, but Haifa also, are brutal. Brutal. The missiles are ripping them up. And they're not about to quit. And Hezbollah apparently is not about to quit either. And have you seen what he's doing to Lebanon now? He's attacking hotels, restaurants, anything the IDF can attack. And he's killing innocent civilians. He's killing Lebanese who have nothing to do with Hezbollah. And he's bringing pressure on the Hezbollah or on the Lebanese government, he thinks. But they don't control Hezbollah. They never have, not really. So this is really another act of just incredible cretin nature. They are becoming 2 more countries this morning. 2 more countries join the case in the ICJ against Israel for genocide. It's up to 19 countries now, I think. This is, nothing will ever happen, feckless a procedure, but it's just an indicator of what a pariah the state of Israel is becoming.
Yeah, and by choice, right? Exactly as you said, this is a war of choice, and it's going up against an existential war for Iran, right? Iran knows the threat from the US and Israel. And I thought it was ironic. I know Trump, in one of his latest ranting social media statuses, basically said everything he doesn't like is AI generated. And I'm like, interesting, considering the photos we've been getting of Bibi Netanyahu that either, exactly as you said, maybe they were pre-recorded, maybe they were from artificial intelligence. I don't know. I just know that they're also using some old photos in their social media posts, and that's never a good look. Now, speaking of stupidity, we have the current level of stupidity that's going on right now. And then we have the next level, or maybe a few levels after, which is the talk of ground troops in Iran. In particular, you've got reports that the Trump administration is looking at sending in troops to try to seize Karg Island, Iran's oil export hub, as punishment for Iran's shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. Is that something we could actually see happen? I mean, is the Trump administration dumb enough to put us in a situation to send troops in when you literally have Iranian officials saying, yeah, come on, send your ground troops, we're waiting for them?
Well, Karg Island is a special place in many respects. It's been the main terminal ever since before the bloody Iran-Iraq war. And many people, including Iraq, tried to take it out. The UAE tried to take it out. It's about a third the size of Manhattan. It's called the Forbidden Isle. One of their premier poets called it the open pearl of the Gulf or something like that. It's an incredibly valuable place because what it does is it allows 10, if you can imagine this, 10 super tankers to fill simultaneously. It's the only deep water in the Gulf. And that's the reason they can get in there and do that all at the same time. It's an enormously important facility for Iran's oil, and in many respects for oil for India and other countries that are on the receiving end. And I would have to think they would defend it majorly and have planned to do that. So if you're going to get that island, you're going to have to sail almost all the way to the northeastern extremity of the Persian Gulf. That's an extremely dangerous passage, given what they can do to you if they want to. And it's an extremely difficult place to get onto and to get into the facilities of. As I said, people before who tried to do it failed to do it. And I really, if we're talking about 5,000 Marines and amphibious bottoms or some other kind of assault, like maybe by Ospreys, about a third of which would probably crash because they have such a tendency to do so, we're talking about putting 5,000 Marines in extreme jeopardy. And I would say probably sending many of them to their death. This is not something I would like to contemplate were I a war planner for this. I would not like to contemplate any way, fashion, or form putting ground forces in Iran. The only really onward movement facility we have is the one we built in Kuwait. Very, very extravagant facility for onward movement of troops. We used it in both Gulf Wars. Back in the early 90s for the first one, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then we used it in 2003 because it is easy to put troops on the ground, facilitate their movement, that is any late training or anything like that has to be done, or acquaintance with the terrain they're going to face or whatever. That's what it's for. And then you go. Well, going into Iraq was one thing. Going into Iran from there causes you to have to cross Basra and Iraq. I'm not sure that would be a good crossing because the Iraqis are not too happy with us right now, particularly the Shia militias, which predominate in that area. And so then you'd have to get across the rest of the territory left in Iraq and in that little extension there to get into Iran, and they could decimate you as you did it. So where are you going to land these ground forces? Are you going to parachute the 82nd Airborne's active brigade for this sort of purpose in there? I dare say about half of them be dead before they hit the ground. So this is it's just wrapped in impossibilities, and worse, it's wrapped in a lot of dead GIs.
Yeah, and it's a reminder of why the US has not done this, right? If it were going to be easy to win a war against Iran or to topple the Iranian government, the US would have pursued that years ago.
Somebody asked me this morning if I could get them the war game that was conducted about 20 years ago by a brilliant lieutenant general in the Marine Corps who happened to be my boss. Van Ripper's his name, Van Riper, I think it's said, but we always called him the Ripper. And he ran one war game. He was expert at this. He was also head of the Marine Corps Development and Education Command. And he ran one war game, and we got beaten so badly. And remember, this is way back. This is 2 decades ago when Iran was not nearly as capable as it is now. We got our rear ends handed to us in the first war game. So they ordered him, the higher authorities, not just the Marine Corps, the top authorities, the secretary, do it again. He did it again. Same results. So they hid it. They essentially tried to hide it. They couldn't hide it because it was too cataclysmic at that moment. But that just goes to show you, even back then when Iran didn't have half the capabilities that it does now, they beat us because that is tough terrain. I keep telling people, You know, the only place on the face of the earth in Alexander the Great's exploits that he almost died was in Persia. It was in Iran, right along the Persian Gulf. You don't want to do this. If you don't have to, you surely don't want to do it. It's you're going to get beaten. I don't care what you say, you're going to get beaten. At the best, if you came out the best possible, you'd have to put 1 million or more troops on the ground. You'd have to do it as quickly as you possibly could, which we couldn't do, and we don't have 1 million troops, and you'd have to have a lot of luck. I mean, and I just don't think that's something you want to bet that many troops' lives on.
And especially with everything that the US has dealt with, right? And in recent years, with all of the wars that we not only haven't won, but I mean, you have the final kind of defeat with the withdrawal of Afghanistan, which obviously we knew that that was not going to be a win. You have the US waging this proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. That's not going to be a victory of any kind there. And we've seen the writing on the wall for a long time. Now you have the US going up against Iran. And going back to what you were saying earlier about Iran's strategy here, they go in and they target the radar systems, they target the eyes first and foremost. Then they start targeting the refueling tankers. And of course, Trump is claiming, no, we haven't lost, 5, 7, I don't know what it's up to now, but all these refueling tankers, we don't have to worry about that. Again, back to the artificial intelligence. But when it comes to Iran's strategy here and what they're prepared for with these retaliatory attacks, how do you see the position that they're in? Because the US wants to act every day like, oh, they've defeated Iran's military or Iran is out of missiles, but we continue to see the opposite as now they have waged nearly 60 waves of retaliatory attacks.
I don't think Iran is anywhere near exhausted in its missiles. And I also think, and this is formidable in my view, their very best they're saving for the last. And what I mean by that is hypersonic missiles. I mean missiles that move at 3, 4, 5 times the speed of sound and against which there is no defense. And using them against capital warships out in the sea. That's the reason we are so far away. In fact, I'm told we just increased that 1,000-kilometer distance for the carrier battle group in the North Arabian Sea by another 300 miles. So we're getting further and further away because we are fearful of what they might do. And I think that's still in their quiver. I don't think they've used these missiles yet in any significant way. If you want to think about the type I'm talking about, the Oreshnik, for example, that the Russians revealed in Ukraine, that's a similar type missile. It's not just a warhead, it's the speed the missile comes in with. The speed alone is enough to decimate a Manhattan. And then you throw the warhead on it, and you throw the fact that the Iranians seem to have developed, no doubt, probably with North Korean, Russian, Chinese help, what I would call a MIRVed warhead. They're trying to call it a cluster munition because that makes it illegal, even though Israel and the United States are not signed up to that illegality. But I don't think it's really a cluster munition. I'm not an expert on the physics of this, but it looks to me more like what we do with our MIRVed warheads. And that's just multiple independently targetable variable return vehicle. The ballistic missile comes in, it's designed mainly to fire at Soviet ballistic missile silos. Comes in, and at a certain altitude, it deploys these MIRVs, which are themselves either 2 or 3 separate nuclear weapons. And they all go in with an alarming accuracy, and they're designed with that accuracy and that density so that they will kill the warhead underground, because a ballistic missile is hard to kill. It's underground, it's in concrete reinforced silos, just like ours are. So I think that's the kind of, that to me is a better analogy with the kind of missile it is. And you're seeing them in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa right now. You're seeing the missile come in, and then the blaze as it fires all its little sub-missiles, and they go out and just decimate an area, whether it's Tel Aviv or Haifa or some of the other targets they've shot at. So I think Iran's got things it hasn't shown us yet. And then I'm not even considering that China might have things en route right now. Russia might have things en route right now. What are we going to do? Torpedo those boats? Like we did the Indian craft that was in international waters and coming back from an exercise with the Indian Navy. We torpedoed it and sunk it. Another war crime. War crimes are so replete now for the United States that we could probably go down right there with Hitler.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me to see, and they brag about it, right? You have Pete Hegseth come out and he's like, "Oh yeah, that ship thought it would be safe because it was in international waters." And it's like, yeah, that's kind of the point. But the
Yeah.
Trump administration is just so blatant about everything that they're doing. They have no shame whatsoever. The last thing I wanted to get into is the state of Israel and kind of where things stand there, because I know when it comes to Netanyahu, now he's got the war that he's always dreamed of. And while we don't know if he's really missing, we don't know what his status currently is. Exactly as you were noting there, Israel is sustaining both damage and casualties as Iran is targeting them on a daily basis. And as this great iron dome that the US has spent so much money on now appears to be very ineffective. So, what does that mean for Israel, and where do your concerns stand about them possibly turning to a nuclear weapon to use against Iran, especially as they continue to sustain more and more damage?
Let me put it in perspective, if I may, Rachel. When I was working earlier than my State Department gig, but then certainly in my State Department gig, at least the first year and a half, on what we call the Middle East Peace Plan, when we were meeting in Ramallah with Arafat and thought we were making some progress. That was one world. That world's gone. It's completely gone. And the main architect of its disappearance is Bibi Netanyahu. From his orchestration, certainly, I don't have any doubt about this, of the climate in Israel that got Yitzhak Rabin assassinated, to his actual premiership, if you will. He has been the agent of the destruction of a half a century plus of American diplomacy aimed at curing, if you will, this problem that festers in the Levant, in the Middle East, giving the Palestinians some sort of state and making it congruent with what was Israel. That's gone. And that hurts my heart because I spent a lot of my life devoted to that. And I see it up in flames. And I see the main igniter of those flames as being Bibi Netanyahu. And I see it to no purpose other than, as he has said again and again, and Naftali Bennett gave new emphasis to the other day, Greater Israel, which shall extend from Turkey around through Iran and over to Somalia, and maybe further. That's the only reason I can see this going on. And we even had an ambassador in Jerusalem, Mike Huckabee, who kind of confirmed that in open testimony. So I'm really sad that I think all of this is leading to the demise of Israel. I don't think Israel will remain a state as it is currently configured. That is Jewish, Arab, 50-50, and the Arabs third, fourth class citizens even then. I don't think it's going to exist. I think it's doomed. I don't know what will come out of that. Maybe a better deal, if you will, for everyone concerned. Maybe not. Maybe chaos will come out of that. Very good chance for that happening, especially now with what he's doing to Lebanon, because what Netanyahu is doing in Lebanon right now, and I think he would do to Syria if he could, but the U.S. has put a brake on him there, and that is take it. Just take it. Occupy Beirut and take it. They tried to do that in 82, and we stopped them. Sharon was the defense minister at that time, a BB in the making. But this has just come to a point where I don't see how that region of the world can live with an Israel configured the way it is right now and doing what it's doing right now. Does that mean a nuclear weapon? Definitely. Definitely. If it threatens threatens Netanyahu at the same time he can make a case for it threatening the future existence of his Israel, he'll use a nuclear weapon, or two or three or four. because one, on that vast territory of Iran, it would have immediate shock effect, yeah, but it wouldn't have any decisive impact on the war that is currently going on. Two wouldn't. You'd have to use a number of them in very strategic places for even nuclear weapons to have an impact. And I think they know that. So if it happens, it won't happen with a single mushroom cloud. It'll be several mushroom clouds, and the man responsible will be Bibi Netanyahu.
That is the very dangerous place that we seem to be headed in so many ways, because exactly as you're saying there, it's like Israel is getting to this point of no return, and a point where everyone else in the region is looking around and going, wait a second, okay, we have to put a stop to this, because the greater Israel project, it used to be, maybe talked about in conspiracy circles. Now it's being openly talked about by the US ambassador as something that should happen.
I think one of the reasons it gets me now is because that weasel in Ankara, Erdogan, has finally awakened to the reality. I think he's scared to death.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. They look at it, and I know Israel's got their eye on Turkey second, and he should be, or Erdogan should be concerned about this,
Yes.
right? He's tried to play both sides of the field when it comes to whether it's Russia, the US, everybody, trying to be friends with everybody. And now that's put him in a very dangerous situation. And
You got it.
A lot of moving parts there all around. I always appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Colonel Larry Wilkerson, a U.S. Army combat veteran, former Chief of Staff to the U.S. Secretary of State, and a senior fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Rachel, for your time and allowing me to talk.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also catch Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. And you can now find it on YouTube memberships and X subscriptions. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you right back here soon with more updates.